controversy in defence is not uncommon. We've talked about this for the PMC, we've talked about it for conventional weapons. But really, beyond chemical weapons, which, let's say, destroy your lungs and kill you in the most horrible possible way, or biological weapons which may weaponize your own immune system against you, there remains the third class that is in the mainstream, that remains a common topic of discussion, but is still seen as permissible, unlike the biological and the chemical. And people's reaction to it remains oddly dichotomous. On one hand, people are perhaps detached. They see it as stagnant. They see it as a fact of life. They see it as necessary. And on the other, they see it as controversial, dangerous, even evil, actively. In any case, the existence of nuclear weapons, whether right or wrong, is really interesting. And the technology programs that create them are interesting because they're, really mired in secrecy. Some of the planet's most advanced pieces of technology to comprise components and structure. The strategy used for these, by definition, strategic weapons is unique. It's not like any other weapon we have, because it's in a class of its own. And it's fascinating, even if we're only to look at it in a theoretical way, which is largely the way it's meant to be looked at, considering that they are used as deterrents. In any case, it's really fascinating. In short, I'll be talking about the UK's best nuke, the strategic nuclear device that is the Trident intercontinental ballistic missile. And obviously you will know it well. It's the follow-on from the UK's Polaris programme. It's the upgrade. So, first let's go through what Trident is. Trident, in effect, is just a munition in itself. But beyond that is really an entire programme. The idea is that the UK could procure modern nuclear missiles, and they could be operated by the Royal Navy, launched from strategically placed nuclear submarines. One is always on patrol. The MOD says that Trident is designed to deter the most extreme threats to our national security and way of life, which cannot be done by other means. It is an entire programme. Trident, because of the secrecy it requires, is so intensive for the government and basically in cost. Unlike other munitions, for obvious reasons, because it involves nuclear devices, both in lethality, manner of death, the mass threat that a nuclear missile may pose, were they ever actually to point one at anyone with any intention. Trident and all nuclear devices programs can't simply be done by some sort of contract. It can't merely be through the normal defence contract means. You can't post something online about someone procuring a nuke. And because they are weapons of mass destruction, they have to be treated very carefully, in a rightly compartmentalised and pretty secretive manner. Nobody works on the entire programme, nobody knows all of the technology, and that's largely the way it should be, because that's the most responsible way to do it. But this means that projects are often more difficult, logistically, and in a lot of other ways, particularly if you have, effectively, technology hardpoints. Places that computers can't leave, servers that only operate on a singular computer that require complex entry. It becomes pretty difficult, and the funding costs a lot, considering that these technologies are some of the most advanced. It's not merely operating more classical aerospace and defence technologies. It's combining aerospace, defence, and effectively everything that comes along with that. So, what I meant to say is it's not merely operating sort of air and defence technologies. It's also incorporating space, because these are intercontinental ballistic missiles, which makes it some of the most complex stuff. You're effectively building something which has to be more targeted than the most complex rockets that exist today, and simultaneously operate, really, really well as a weapon containing the most potent things on the planet. So, it's pretty fascinating. Trident, of course, is still in use today, and that's largely why it's so pertinent and so consequential. First things first, a lot of people are aware of the fact that Trident is a missile made by the USA, I think Lockheed Martin, largely. And the USA also operates Trident in its own nuclear arsenal. Trident, the missile, is US made, but nonetheless, the warhead of the missile, the more significant part, in my view, is British. So every country has a responsibility to create its own warhead, and I believe that is highlighted through, effectively, convention and just expectation. So let's actually talk about Trident now. The full name of the Trident missile is the UGM-113 Trident II missile, otherwise known as Trident D5. Launch for this missile, of course, is complicated, but let's say once it's been sorted out, once the launch sequence has been initiated and confirmed, the onboard Mark 6 navigation system is activated. And from here, the trajectory, destination, which will all be pre-designated, can be loaded into the designation computer. From here, what we see is a sort of steam generator, and it ignites a smaller rocket which is fed into cooling water, propelling the missile out of the submarine and upwards, basically through gas. So this is what I was talking about with, a lot of VLS systems. This is the equivalent of cold launch. After the missile breaks the surface of the water, thrust vectoring occurs. This means it moves into position for full launch upwards. And again, after that, after this first stage, after it's completed thrust vectoring, the first stage rocket is dropped, and a spike extends at the front, and that's designed to make it, I think it's literally called the aero spike. It's designed to make it more aerodynamic as it propels itself into space. And I'm sure that Aladdin would approve of the spikiness. In any case, once it's completed this stage, once it's dropped that first stage rocket, once it's made itself more aerodynamic by extending this frontward spike, then there's nowhere to go but up. It launches into space, and once it gets there, which it takes the most direct path to get there, apparently it uses a sort of camera to literally find a star that it wants to go towards and just rockets up towards it as fast as humanly possible. So it's really impressive stuff, and it's the most direct route because obviously if one of these is being fired, it's the most dire of circumstances. Once in space, or in effectively low orbit, it moves into position, and the missile tries to orient itself to aim the re-entry vehicles, which it can do through simple nozzle thrust vectoring, I think using some sort of gas piston. Once it has the warheads, the re-entry vehicles which carry the warheads are properly targeted, and they're all ready to go. Once they've aligned with their target, the sub-vehicles launch. And of course, these do carry the warheads, and the warheads that the UK uses are called Holbrook. And they are, massively powerful. They have a maximum yield of 100 kilotons. They don't just pack a punch, as I often say with other munitions. They literally pack all the fists of the UK 1,000 times over. Probably a lot more than that. And it has the choice of two yields. So you have that traditional maximum, 100 kilotons, which would be probably the more common one were it to be needed for nuclear retaliation, or effectively the amount that maximizes deterrence. Or it can be set to effectively somewhere within the range of 0.3 to 10 kilotons. So still lots of fists, but still it can be set to a less potent level. And kilotons is how we measure the, power of a blast. It's kilotons equivalent of TNT. So that's a lot. That's 100 kilotons of TNT. In any case, the warhead itself, Holbrook, is thermonuclear, which is something you've probably heard, meaning the warheads are smaller, more powerful than the sort of traditional warheads that were first used in nuclear bombs. And of course, they are hugely powerful. You have several re-entry vehicles hitting several targets to effectively maximize its ability to strike. And of course, sort of factoring in for the defense or the destruction of re-entry vehicles that may be caused by certain, I guess you'd define them as Star Wars systems. So the UK, in operation of Trident, always has one submarine that's constantly on standby, and it's constantly patrolling around the world at, obviously, a discrete location, and it's on standby in case a launch is ever needed, or counter-launch is needed. And then the submarine, that is the Vanguard class, which, beautiful submarine built by BAE Systems Submarines, then Vickers Shipbuilding and Engineering. These submarines are about as advanced as it gets, so not only are the submarines nearly impossible to find, because they are impossible to find by design, considering that their really sole function is this patrol, it synergizes with the missile itself, meaning the UK's nuclear protection, its nuclear deterrent threat, is actually really quite powerful. And despite the fact that people often go on about Russia and the US having, thousands of missiles, that sort of thing, the UK has a significant amount of missiles, and with missiles that are as powerful as Trident and that have a warhead as powerful as Holbrook, that pack this 100 kilotons of TNT, I certainly think that the UK is nuclear capable, that its nuclear capability is acceptable, and that Trident is generally pretty incredible advanced technology considering the area that it operates in, that being both underwater, starting in the submarine, underwater, into the air, out into space, and then re-entering for ground strike. Really impressive technology, so please do go look it up. And I think I'm probably going to do one on the controversy of nuclear weapons. So I'll leave it there for today.